Oh, hi guys.
Good morning. How is everyone?
Welcome to IDEO U's first ever creative series.
Welcome. I'm Suzanne Gibbs Howard. I'm the Dean of IDEO U.
And I'm Em Havens. I'm a community designer here at IDEO U. And we have a really exciting lesson planned for you guys today that we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to give people a little bit of time to log in and introduce themselves as well. This is actually our very first creative series in this, and so we're prototyping, and we're really excited that you're here to get a sneak peek into the lesson for Storytelling for Influence.
So do you want to share with people how they can introduce themselves if you haven't figured it out already?
Yeah, so the best way to introduce yourself is once you're in the course, you can go up to the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And if you scroll over, you'll see this little this QA button. And you can click that, and that's the best way to ask questions. So we actually are monitoring questions. We'll be able to see them. And we have our lovely Jeff here as well, who is going to be looking at those questions too and passing them along to us. Great.
So we've already got one question popping up from Shrutin about storytelling, how it generally motivates. How can it help people who are maybe a little less driven? And so I think with the major tip that we're going to share today, I think it's going to be really relevant to that question. And so hang on a few minutes and we'll share that. I think things that we'll do, we'll share a little bit about storytelling and how it can help your influence. We'll give one of my favorite tips from the entire course. There are many, many things to share through that entire course, but we'll share one favorite with you today. And then we'll do a little exercise and share a bit of a case study that we've put together to bring everything to life, and then have plenty of time for questions and all sorts of things. We'd like to make this a little bit interactive, so get comfortable with that Q&A button, and hopefully you can share your thoughts as we go.
Yes, awesome. And for those of you who are just joining, please do take a moment to introduce yourself and share where you're logging in from. And maybe a little story about what storytelling looks like in your life and how it shows up in your work or in your personal life, your personal world.
Should we show people how to find the Q&A button?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely should show people. So the best way to find the Q&A button is if you scroll up into the upper left-hand corner of your screen. You can click on this Q&A, and that once you click on that, you'll be able to communicate.
Actually, on my screen, there's 9 buttons here.
On some screens, it might be in the upper right-hand corner, and that's another place where you might find it, depending on what platform you're on.
Perfect. Jeff, he's our behind-the-scenes guy. He's got all the answers. We'll give folks just 1 or 2 more minutes to log in and get situated, and then we'll jump into our criteria. So for those of you who are just joining, another way, thank you, Stephanie, for the tip. Another way to access the Q&A is if you go into the upper right-hand corner and you click on these 9 little boxes, then this Q&A will pop up and you'll be able to communicate with us.
We've another great question, or just a comment, that a lot of people feel like storytelling is a big buzzword right now. A lot of companies are talking about it. What does it mean? How does it differ from presentations? I think we'll talk a little bit more about this, but we think it is a big buzzword of the moment. And so we'll talk about ways that you can bring quality to the notion of storytelling and bring a little more depth to straight up presentations that a lot of us are always giving.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Great question right off the bat. Sue, it looks like we have people joining from all over. Hi, Sarah. Welcome, Sarah, from the foot of the Rocky Mountains. She says she uses storytelling every day, writing marketing content for an awesome learning company. Awesome. We really like learning companies. Stephanie from DC, Amy from San Jose. Hi, Amy. Great to see you. Amy was an amazing student in one of our past courses. From Loveland, Sarah from Syracuse. Wow, double majoring in graphic design and information management technology. Well, I think let's get started.
Yep.
We have some slides that we're going to share with you guys right here.
All right. So this is part of a larger series that we're moving on about giving you tips and tricks from inside of IDEO U and helping more people all around the world learn to solve anything creatively. So I'm Suzanne. I'm the founder and dean of IDEO U. I've been practicing creativity and innovation in the world of business for 20 years. And I've done a lot of work across the whole range of things that IDEO does and works on. And Em.
And I'm Em Havens. I'm a community designer here with IDEO U, and my background really is in venture philanthropy and social finance, but I've been working for the past couple of years really thinking about how we build out learning communities so that they can best support people to learn.
So we want to dive right into storytelling for influence. How can you move, motivate, and mobilize your teams? So, to the point of one of our participants already this morning, storytelling is kind of a buzzword. It's flying around all over the place in a lot of articles and business press. And so what is it? It's a presentation or a pitch. Telling a great story can be really about convincing your boss. You need resources or a raise. It can be an executive summary, or it can be a simple argument that you're trying to construct to convince and compel. So all of these things are variations on the ways storytelling gets used. But one of the things that we do know is that if you are trying to expand your leadership skills and grow your influence, having quality storytelling skills under your belt is one of the simplest, quickest ways that you can increase your influence and catalyze change. And this change and this capability is about motivating both internal teams that you might be working with inside of your organization, but it's also the very essence of mobilizing massive global audiences to follow a cause. So just to start off, we want to start with our first moment of participation, which is just asking you guys what you see that's wrong with the typical presentation. So if you can, go ahead and chat up a few options for us on that Q&A button. Give you a moment. But we all sit in presentations all the time, and what is often going wrong? Sorry, we're checking on one thing technologically. All right, we feel like the slides might be seeing a little bit of a delay here. All right, we're going to move on. Some of the things that we typically hear with presentations are that a presenter is completely disengaged from the room that they're in. They're just looking down, they're reading notes straight from the screen, they're dealing with the technology instead of focusing on the room. Other problems we see is that there's often an overemphasis on data. So there's just a lot of information coming at people. People feel overwhelmed with all of the things going on. And sometimes next steps just aren't that compelling. People are listening to something and then the next steps are like, meet again or something like that. And it's just not really pushing people forward. So here's our tip of the day. If there's one simple way to increase influence, what we see is the idea of bringing in emotion to the presentations that you're giving. And the simplest and quickest way to do this is through telling a personal story, something that really resonates with that audience. So just a little bit on why emotion actually matters in a business situation, because it's often the last thing that you think you're supposed to do is get emotional at work. So when we think about the chemistry in your brain and what stories do, when individuals hear an emotional story, it triggers dopamine in the brain. And this dopamine strikes a chord and triggers deeper memories that also catalyze and move people toward action. And so while we are very used to seeing lots of data and lots of statistics in the world of business, we know that a well-told, emotionally compelling story is always going to win out over a stat. And so this is really important in the world of innovation. So we know that today in business, analytics are absolutely king. We put on our power suits and we walk into the business meeting and people feel like they just want a fire hose of data streaming at individuals to try to influence them to do what they want. But one of the things we know from an individual and a thought leader that a lot of us follow here at IDEO is Roger Martin from the Martin Prosperity Institute. And what Roger says is that it's not possible to prove analytically that a new idea is a good one in advance. If it's new, there's no data. You can't measure about how people will actually interact with it in the world. And so as a result, we can't measure things that don't exist yet. So when we're dealing with the world of innovation, a belief and a thing that we say around IDEO all the time is that every innovation begins as a story. If you want to lead people into the future, which often involves leading them into the unknown, you need a powerful emotional story to move them forward. Emotion-filled storytelling, for those of you who can see the images on the screen, moves people from that blank stare where they might be looking at you and wondering what it is that you're asking of them to from a passive state toward an active one. So many of you are familiar with IDEO. Em and I are from IDEO. We've worked here for a long time. We're a community of people. I just want to give you a little background on how storytelling plays in the work we do here. But IDEO has done work across over 3 decades, 10 offices around the globe, 700 designers, 5,000 innovative products, services, environments, brands, organizations. We've worked on things like Apple's first mouse back in the 1980s, and storytelling was a powerful part of that, which we'll come back to. We've worked across things and products and services in the world of education, like the student desk. We've worked in healthcare products. We've designed entire school systems for the emerging middle class in the nation of Peru. And today, we're going to share some of the details in an interactive way around some work that we did fairly recently for the Chicago Fire soccer team. But what's common across this incredibly diverse array of projects that we work on is the design thinking approach. So whenever we tackle any challenge, we think very first about people and desirability, but we also integrate that with technical and business values. Is it feasible, and is it also viable? We have one little check here. Technological moment, talking about technological feasibility. One moment, please.
We just wanted to make sure that you can see all the slides.
All right, you guys can see all of our beautiful slides now. I'm gonna keep moving forward. So here we've got the general framework that's often used to talk about design thinking. So desirability, feasibility, and viability. And the role of storytelling is that storytelling really wraps around these 3 lenses and helps to catalyze people and move them forward. Here's one of my favorite quotes from Jen Mayer, one of our design directors. To lead people in doing something that's never been done before, you've got to touch them emotionally. And the reason is that they need to stop thinking with their analytic, naysaying minds and start believing with their open, generative minds. So, okay, great timing. You can see some of these slides now. There's a teeny bit of a delay, but we're gonna try a storytelling activity together. And what we call this is put yourself in Zach's shoes. Okay, so Zach is one of our designers, one of our fabulous design leaders in our Chicago studio. And Zach was tackling a challenge He had been a part of a team working on a project for the Chicago Fire. So the Chicago Fire had come in, and they were one of Chicago's lesser known sports teams. They weren't getting the number of fans into seats that they needed. And so we needed to work with them not only to do some marketing and messaging to attract people to the game, but also to think about the holistic game time experience. So what was the experience in the stadium, and how once people came there, would you get them to come back and think about it and return again? This was right around the time of the 2014 World Cup, so big time in the world of soccer. Here's the challenge that the Chicago Fire was facing. They were far from the favorite sports team. I mean, Chicago is a huge sports town, and there's a lot of competition for attention, from the Bears to the Bulls, to the Blackhawks, to the Cubs. There's a lot of competition for sports attention. And the Chicago Fire was like the distant second or third cousin in this family. To top it off, the messaging that had been used with the Chicago Fire was really safe. It was very vanilla. It was kind of attracting just about anyone. It was about fire fans and the Chicago Fire, the 2014, the fire still burns, and we weren't really finding an emotional trigger for these fans. So if you were Zach, what would you do? We'll pause for a moment and ask people to give input. So some of the things that we're seeing here on our end are that people are saying, you know, he would go out and start to brainstorm with lots of people. He would look and try to understand fans from different sports. I think that's very interesting. All right, we'll dive in and sort of share with you what Zach and his amazing team did. So in the true to the design thinking approach, they got inspired by real stories. So they certainly went to more than their share of Chicago Fire games. They learned about fans and fan culture in general, certainly getting inspired by extreme fans in other sports groups. But when they went to the Chicago Fire games and started to learn about their fans, an extreme group of fans in a particular section of the stadium really caught their eye. So these fans were painting their faces, they were standing for the entire game, they were traveling to all of the away games, they were writing their own cheers and their own chants for the team. And so they started to get closer to these fans, and they started to learn more of their backgrounds. A lot of them were from countries where soccer or football was much more popular and was a pivotal part of their growing up and their existence. They were things that connected families together. And so these kind of rowdy, extreme fans really started to strike a chord with the passion that the Chicago Fire team also wanted to trigger. It was the kind of thing that we hear from Bill Shankly, he's the Liverpool team manager, and he's very famous for saying, football is a matter of life or death, only it's more important. And so these fans were of that zeitgeist. They were of that way of thinking. They would stand and scream for the entire 90-minute game and lose their voices every time. And this was the passion that our team wanted to bring to the Chicago Fire. And so what Zach started to see in his work with his team and in his work with Chicago Fire leadership was that there was this group of fans could have been seen as edgy and extreme and more of a problem, but they also had exactly the right emotional chord that the leadership team had themselves. They wanted to be not the average corporate sports team leadership. They had a little bit of an off-center stance to them. They had incredible passion for the game. And so Zach and his team started to stitch all of this together with a story. They started to talk about being less safe and more punk rock. And on that theme, they prototyped all sorts of more irreverent ideas to bring it to life. They wanted to have contests to write the fire anthem and have buses with a hell ride and bars outside as people arrived at the game. They had tons and tons of great design ideas. They prototyped edgy campaigns that played off of the chants that were being sung in the Fire Stadium and that really amplified the passion of these extreme fans. And then through all of that, and through all of those stories, they gave very compelling next steps. And so those next steps, technological moment, apologies. We're aware that the slides are not advancing for everyone, and we apologize for that. And we'll do what we can just to make this a part of the process. But
here we go.
All right, so they gave compelling next steps, and they shared a really emotional story. And that moved people emotionally, influenced leadership, and ultimately impacted public awareness. For those of you not able to see the slides, I'll read that Atul Kosa, the COO of Chicago Fire, said that attendance for fire games was up nearly 21% compared to a point in prior seasons. So this is the kind of thing that we mean. This is the kind of story that we're talking about when we're bringing emotion into a story and emotion into the workplace. It's not about crying at work. It's about bringing these emotionally compelling stories so that you're moving not only the people who are already passionate, but the people who might not have been passionate before. So with that, why don't we move to Q&A? And we'll see what kind of questions people might have about the course. This is an example of just one of many tips that we share inside of the course. And so what we want to do, I think since the slides are not working for absolutely everyone, we just wanted to open it up and have question and answer period. I think we're interested in stories that people are tackling. We're also happy to share more about the course and the structure of it and the way it functions inside of IDEO U.
You got a couple.
Yeah, we have a couple questions that have come in, Suze, actually from folks from around the world. It looks like people are chiming in from Italy, from England. I feel like it's kind of late there.
Yeah, we saw people in from Buenos Aires. So welcome, everyone.
Welcome. One, that I think is really interesting is, do you think that storytelling varies from country to country and culture to culture?
Yeah.
About storytelling.
I think that's an amazing question. I think there are certainly different kinds of stories that get told in different cultures. I think the length of the story and how deep it goes in particular cultures might vary. We certainly know there are certain cultures, like we have some people on, and some of our mentors inside of this course are from Ireland, which is really well known for a very thick and wonderful storytelling culture, whereas others might be more cursory. Others might be more about telling things with a sense of humor, or if you're friends with people from Latin cultures, they might be a little more emotional. But no matter what, across the board, I think it is very common, and it is chemical in your brain, that if you do tell a story that can strike the right emotional chord, that is something that can catalyze action and compel people forward.
So
it is true that you need to know what, tune in to the unique culture that you're speaking to.
It's one thing we talk a lot about in the course too is, as you develop your brief and as you develop your blueprint, you have to really understand who you're talking to and who your audience is, and find the right medium to convey your story depending on who that audience is.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of times it feels very daring in a culture that's not an emotional, not a rich storytelling, often very data-driven culture. It's hard to be one of the first ones to pause and tell that emotional story. We've definitely worked with a lot of clients and students on our platform, learners, who come in and they're saying, but in my organization, we just don't do things this way. I think then bringing in a unique story can really strike a chord even more. And it's very tough to do the first time, but once you get in the habit of it, I think in studies we've seen in our courses, people lead with an emotional story, and they find when they gather feedback from the people who heard it, that story is what really drew them in and helped them pay attention.
So powerful. We have another really good one, actually. It's from, I'm not exactly sure who it's from, but it's how can storytelling be used in branding?
Yeah. I think with branding and marketing, we definitely see that stories are critical. I think in one of the projects that we talk about a little bit inside of the course, and in a longer version of this presentation, we talk about work on the Steelcase Node chair, which is a student desk that we designed that was very iconic, very different than the average student desk that kind of locks you in and you can't move and squashes you down and you feel very rigid and linear in your thinking when you're in these desks. We designed a desk that was much more about modern students, about motion, about movement, about collaboration, about being able to use the wheels and move. It was bright colors. So the stories that we connected to about students and student needs and teachers needs became a part of the brand for the student desk. And through that, a part of the messaging that needed to roll out. So I think if you have great insights that you're connecting, telling those stories about those iconic users can be something that really, truly, and deeply affects a brand.
I love that. Yeah, that's such a great example of what we've done here at IDEO. And really, like, brand, or what brand really means to us as IDEOers. I think it's so much more than a logo or so much more than a tagline, but instead it's really about the tone, the personality that comes through that brand. You know, we even at IDEO U had just went through an exercise to try and think through what is our brand, what is our personality, and what is the story that we want people to tell about us, and how do we want them to interact. So
yeah, I think in branding, a lot of branding people talk about the truth. What is the truth? That's a big, huge question for us early in the morning on a Friday. But I think when you find that iconic story that just really captures the heart of the change that you want to make in the world, that's a big, important truth that a brand can get behind.
It's really powerful. And it's how you tell stories that are going to ultimately have more of that impact when you can speak that truth. We have one from Ross Tom. Happy Friday, Ross, or happy Saturday to those of you in Australia. Any tips on balancing emotional storytelling versus the traditional case study?
Yeah, great question.
Great question.
I think that they can work together really well. I think we definitely see client organizations, and the centerpiece of MBA type learning experiences is often the case study and the case study method, right? There's a reason that that's important. There's a reason that that's critical in many businesses. Think leading or punctuating a case study with something that is an anecdote that illustrates the emotion in the case study can be a way to bring these two worlds together. So we're not saying we don't believe in data, we don't believe in statistics. We know all of those things are incredibly important and incredibly valuable. We just think that what often gets left behind on the cutting room floor are those emotional stories, because people think of them as just an anecdote, not proof. And so I think they're more about coloring in the black and white lines and illustrating and bringing to life the cause that you're all working toward.
That's such a good answer. We have one similar to the one that we talked about in the beginning, but I think it's definitely worth bringing up again. You know, this person asked, how can storytelling work with less motivated team members? And is it best to tweak the story and do one-on-one sessions? What are the ways that we can use storytelling to motivate other team members?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I think in this example, and the tip that we're really focusing on today, the weight is on the person constructing the story. In the story we share of Zach, you know, it's oversimplified the way we're playing it out. But Zach did this heavy work, and his team did this heavy work to really focus on the one big idea. We talk about that a lot in the course. How do you identify that one big idea and then tell stories around it? I think if you can strike that right chord, that is a way to compel less motivated team members. I think another thing that we talk a lot about in the course is that you can rally people through the process of prototyping and getting their feedback. I think we often focus in many people who think about the process of prototyping, think about it as a mechanism to drive the idea forward, getting feedback to integrate and move forward that idea and make it better. But part of what also happens with stakeholders and others on the team, others that are a part of that process, is that they are a part of making that singular idea better. And everybody wants to be a part of creating the things that they follow, and then people follow what it is that they create. And so if somebody's coming forward and saying, this is all my idea, everybody get behind me, it's more rare that people will follow that than if you open it up and let other people participate and build into that singular vision.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. Storytelling really, I love that insight that you just shared, where storytelling is that opportunity to help to bring people along in creating the journey instead of saying, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. And the secret is that their ideas are often good and often make your idea better. So
Right.
It's beneficial on all sides to prototype with the building of a story, just like you would prototype with the building of a piece of software or a physical product or service experience.
So powerful. We have something coming in from Steph L. What was that emotional story in the Chicago fire process? Great question. I'm so glad you asked that.
Yeah, so I think the ultimate emotional story was about the passion of these particular extremist fans. And so I think what was the trigger was that those extremist fans could have been seen as the problem children. They could have been seen as the punks who were in there and causing trouble. They were the fans who had deep emotion for the game. They were the fans who had spent their lives really being passionate about soccer. And so that was where the emotion came from. And there were specific stories that got told about specific fans who followed the Chicago fire. I think the connection with fire leadership was that there was a tendency for leadership to want to ignore and not focus on these edgy extremist kind of punkish fans. Instead, when they could embrace them and embrace the zeitgeist and the value and the passion that these fans had, that's where they got that strong connection with people and bringing them to fire games.
Mm-hmm. We have another one from Katrina from Germany. What kinds of projects do students work on in the course? This is a great question, and we see really, a wide variety of different projects that folks work on. I think that a lot of people who show up to our storytelling course are, high-level marketing managers or CEOs who are trying to better hone their pitch and hone a presentation. So, they show up with the work that they're doing and are really trying to make that more emotional or apply the IDEO-esque tips to better activate and create impact within their organization. But on the flip side, we also see folks who are showing up and really are trying to tell either a personal story, whether it's a TED Talk kind of thing or a mock sort of thing, and they're there really from a personal standpoint, just working on improving those skill sets from that more individual perspective. So a wide variety of folks who are showing up from all different walks of life and from around the globe telling that story.
One thing we invite you to do, in addition to questions, is share a challenge that you might be working on. And I think that is part of the beauty of our online courses is the power of the community, that through our platform, you're able to hold conversations and collaborate with teams from all around the globe, a group of like-minded people who are passionate about making change in the world. And so what we see is that by sharing the questions that individuals might tackle, everybody's challenges and everybody's questions get a little bit better. So we certainly see people tackling things that might be a little more personal. How do I get the raise or the promotion that I want? Or how do I rally leadership around the resources I need? Or from a little bit more of a top-down perspective, I've got this big effort that I'm trying to push forward and I need people to get in line and join and bring their energy and creativity to that challenge. So all sorts of things. Let's see. Ooh, some great questions. I think one here from Truck is saying, how do you add emotion to presentations based in fact? I think that is a terrific question. And I think the essence of our design thinking approach to anything is that part of getting inspired is going out and talking to real people in the real world. Or if you can't talk to real people, how do you get in touch with them online? How do you spend time understanding their stories? That can be a pretty overwhelming step for a lot of people to get started. But I think if you just take small bites, even go out one day and meet people that you can, or get in touch with your customers or potential customers, talk to them on the phone, meet them out for a cup of coffee, go to the retail environments, the hospitals where they are. Getting those face-to-face stories is absolutely one of the critical steps. So you need to understand what the facts and the real stories are, and that's a way to build off of them. It's very challenging to have a story in your life for every single moment. I think sometimes you have to dig deep, and sometimes it's about going out and doing the footwork. There's a bunch of people are asking at the high level about steps, frameworks, and ingredients for a good story. I think lots and lots of courses on storytelling start from the idea of a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You need to have a storytelling arc where you introduce the characters, you build momentum, you have a climax, then there's like a resolution to that climax. These are definitely basic storytelling structures, and we certainly link to some of these resources that are commonly shared all over the web. I think some of the things that we try to think about in this course and share are, number one is a process that can make any story better. So going out, having a tight brief, being in touch with your customers, the process of prototyping, helping people figure out how to prototype. And then at the end, we do share a handful of tips that can help any story have a stronger tone and deeper impact. So those are exactly some of the things I think that we try to share inside of the course. Instead of saying every story has to have this arc to it, I think that's great. We're not necessarily believers that it's exactly that simple. Those are great things to have in there, that there's a hero's journey and all of these things, all fantastic. But I think what we want you to come away with from this course is a process that can make any story you're working on valuable, impactful, compelling to mobilize others. Some questions here about in the curriculum for storytelling, what will be covered. So those are some of the things we talked about. There's a lesson on the brief and the big idea, how to get there, and what are those frameworks. The process of prototyping your story and bringing it to life in very interactive, learn by doing approaches. And then at the end, really, how do you hone your story? Everyone through the course is working on their own story as they do it. There are many opportunities to collaborate with each other, share examples, and get those back. So that's one of the ways that we get a wealth of different industries involved. I think beyond that, do you want to talk about some of the cases?
One other thing that I would add to that to build off of it is that the course itself is taught by one of our design directors, Jen Mayer, and she has this wealth of wisdom and knowledge when it comes to what is this storytelling process that is really going to empower you and set you up for success to tell stories to create impact. And the learn by doing element is such, for me, when I've been in these classes working with students, has been that really transformational piece where you're going to go out there and you'll learn these strategies and you'll learn these skills and tools, but we don't stop there. We say, hey, go out there and give it a try. Get into your community, get some direct feedback on what that story might look like in fun and creative ways, and then come back and iterate. So I think when we think about our curriculum, it's so closely tied to the design thinking framework that IDEO is so well known for. Yeah.
Oh my God, there are so many great questions. We only have a few moments left. I think here's one that's it's getting a bunch of plus ones. So how do you choose the voice of the narrator telling the story? I think that's a fantastic question. Another buzzword, but it's a buzzword for a reason, is that the voice of the narrator needs to be authentic. That person needs to be telling things that are true and from their own heart. And so I think that is why developing empathy for the people that you're speaking to, your audience, and developing empathy for the people that you are telling a story about are so critical. If you're not feeling emotion, you can't present these stories from a compelling stance. So the voice of that narrator at the highest level needs to be true to who that person actually is. I think sometimes people might be, one of the things we see with creativity is that a lot of times we've tuned out the personal, the creative, the experimental in our work lives because there's a little bit of fear there. We feel like there's risk in that. There's risk in sharing vulnerability. There's risk in trying something that's not commonly done in the culture. So I think even in the most analytical cultures, even for the people who might come across as very numbers and facts and data oriented, what we've seen time and time again is if those individuals dig deep, find that personal story that really means something to them and figure out how to tell it in a way that's true and authentic to them and that resonates with the others out there. That's what developing voice is about. Again, many more tips inside of the course, but authenticity and using real human language instead of jargon is part of the way to get there.
Totally. It's something that I think in the course we really go deep into because like our whole process is focused on human-centered design. So one, it's about, I love this question because right off the bat, storytelling is about how do you tell the story. But really for this, when you're trying to figure out the voice of the narrative, you have to figure out who is the right person to tell the story so that people can hear it. Because you can go and you can project and you can share all this information, but if it doesn't resonate with people or if the voice of who it's coming from is it impossible for people to hear it, then it's not worth it. It's a wasted effort.
Yeah. I think we'll close this morning for us and evening for some of the rest of you on one more point. Dan P. asks, why does the analytical model for presentations pervasively exist? I love this question. I think we ask ourselves every day why that's true. I think we know we've been in the development of the courses and the curriculum that we're creating for you here at IDEO U. We've looked at the trends and the changes coming in business culture. We've worked with experts across academia and thought leaders in the world who are looking at how leadership has gotten to the place that it is. I think when we look at leadership traditionally in the business world, it is very top-down, very command and control, very much about making decisions quickly and efficiently. And we believe that there's a change that's coming. I think there are studies from IBM and other organizations out there saying that with the world as complex, as fast changing as it is, as agile as organizations need to be, we need more creativity. We need to deal with the complex, messy issues that are out there. And those things are not simple. As we were talking about at the beginning of this, when we're dealing with innovations and creative solutions, they don't exist. You can't measure them. So we think this course and many of the others that we're developing for you right now are about bringing around that wave of change and giving people the resources they need to enter the business world in a different way, leading with creativity, leading with things like stories. So on that note, thank you for joining us this morning. Thanks for being a part of this prototype for us. We know from here we just get better and better. So we appreciate people dealing with some of the technological challenges, and we hope many of you were able to see and participate in the discussion today.
Yeah, awesome. We'll hopefully see you in the course next week.
Yeah, the last point is the course Storytelling for Influence officially starts on March 2nd. You can go to our site and find the link for storytelling up at the top of the page, and that's where you can register. And we know some of you are students from IDEO U in the past, and we welcome you back. And we look forward to getting to know more of you with and through the work inside of our course.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. Have a good Friday.
Enjoy your weekend.